Anastasia's parents lived modestly. Her father and mother worked at the local sewing factory. Her mother was a seamstress, and her father was an electrician. He also handled other tasks assigned by his superiors. Their wages were low, barely enough to make ends meet. Her mother often said this. In school, Anastasia was an average student, neither good nor bad. She found studying uninteresting and wanted to finish school as soon as possible. She always knew that after school she wouldn't continue her education but would get a job right away. She wanted to earn her own money instead of asking her mother, "Mom, I need to buy a new dress. It's spring already, soon I'll be taking off my outerwear. And all I have are old clothes." "Or make me a dress," she said when she was in the 9th grade. "Anastasia, you know we don't have money, and your younger brother is growing so fast that he always needs something new. I can barely keep up with him, his shoes are torn, his jacket too," her mother complained. Her father would drink after payday, so her mother would watch him and, when she could, take all his money. But if he managed to hide it, he'd come home empty-handed. Anastasia decided while still in school that she would leave her parents and move to another city. The industrial settlement they lived in felt too small for her. Finally, Anastasia graduated from school, moved to a district city, and got a job at a factory. Initially, they didn't want to hire her because she looked thin and small, but she insisted. Perhaps her eagerness and desire to work convinced them to accept her. She got a job in the workshop and was given a small room in a dormitory, where she lived with 2 other girls who also worked at the factory. Anastasia also dreamed of love. She wanted to meet a guy, fall in love once and for all, and have him be a reliable and loving husband. But for now, she focused on earning as much money as possible. She decided to take on extra work after her shifts. When the cleaner in their workshop retired, Anastasia decided to take over the job. She worked hard, and her savings started to grow. She began to dress better finally. However, working all day at the machine and then doing extra work took a toll on her health, even though she was young. Her legs started hurting, and she was hospitalized. It was early September, dry and sunny. Anastasia would go outside and sit on a bench under the hospital windows. One day, while reading a book, she heard a male voice, "Good day, what are you reading? Is it interesting?" Anastasia looked up and saw a young man smiling at her. "Hello, yes, it's interesting. I love to read, what else is there to do in the hospital?" "My name is Matthew, and you?" "Anastasia, I'm in the therapy ward." That's how they met. They often went outside to get some fresh air. Later, they laughed about their romantic meeting in the hospital, as if there was no other place for them to meet. "You never know where fate will find you," she told her roommates. Matthew turned out to be kind and empathetic. He was also from out of town, his parents lived in a village, but he didn't want to stay there. He decided to move to the city and didn't regret it. He got a job and a place in the dormitory. Anastasia and Matthew dated for about a year before deciding to get married. It wasn't easy, of course. At first, they lived in his dorm room. They dreamed of living in the city, buying an apartment, having children, and living like everyone else. But suddenly Matthew received a telegram from the village. His mother had passed away. He was deeply affected, and his father was left alone. They went together to the funeral, and after the funeral, his father asked him, "Matthew, I can't manage alone here in the village. Move here with your wife. Look at this sturdy house. I built everything with my own hands, strong and lasting for 100 years. And you see, I've become very weak, and your mother's death has struck me hard. I thought I'd go first, but how can I live without her now? Fate has decided that your mother has gone to a better place and left me here. I'm lonely without her." "All right, Dad, you're still on your feet, we'll manage, Matthew replied and went to talk to his wife. Who was in the yard at the time? Anastasia, I need to talk to you. Father is asking us to move here to the village. He's unwell, sick, and afraid of being left alone. It's hard to be alone in the house. Anastasia didn't want to return to the village, she had just gotten used to city life. But a husband is a husband, and her father-in-law was alone now. Alright, I'll have to get used to village life again. It's not a problem for me, I was born in a settlement and lived in my own house, so we'll move. Of course, there will be less money, but we'll manage. After all, when we have children, they can grow up in the fresh air. The village is big, there's a new school, children from the surrounding area come to study. There's a kindergarten, and even a health post. So they changed their place of residence. Matthew had to work as a tractor driver in the village, and Anastasia got a job as a cook in the kindergarten. Matthew's father had worked here all his life as a mechanic, but his health was poor. A year after moving to the village, Anastasia gave birth to a son, and a month later, Matthew's father passed away. They no longer wanted to move back to the city, they had settled in, had their own house, though the salary was less than in the city. But they didn't want to live in a dormitory again. One day, Matthew suggested to his wife, Anastasia, let's raise bulls and then sell the meat. We have some money left from my father. We'll buy them, fatten them up over the winter, and sell them. Let's try. Maybe it will work out for us? Anastasia shrugged and supported her husband. Of course, there was more work, but after a few years, they had some spare money. Matthew and Anastasia quit their jobs and focused entirely on their farm. They kept a cow for themselves, had their own milk, cream, and butter, plus chickens and ducks. Time passed, Matthew built a second floor, a new bathhouse, and a new barn. By then, they had 2 children, as they had a daughter. If you looked from the outside, their family was well off and prosperous, both hardworking. The children were growing up, they would soon finish school and leave for the city. As the parents had decided. They had money, but something was wrong with Matthew. The neighbors didn't know or notice anything, but it had become difficult for Anastasia to live with her husband. He had become greedy. As soon as they started living well, he became incredibly stingy. Money had drastically changed his character. He managed the money himself, giving Anastasia just enough to go to the store and buy groceries, and often he shopped himself. It got to the point of being ridiculous, though it wasn't funny to his wife. Anastasia, how many eggs did you collect today, and how many did you use for baking? He would ask for a report from his wife and then write everything down in a notebook. Anastasia no longer even bought bread at the store, she baked it at home because it was cheaper. Anastasia, I bought soap and shampoo. It seems like we're buying it too often. Don't use too much shampoo, it's money, Matthew would grumble. The children need new clothes, they've grown up, Anastasia said. He agreed about the children, but didn't buy anything extra. Their son finished school, got into college, and moved out, coming home only for holidays. He lived in a dormitory, and his father brought him groceries, potatoes, milk, and some money. Their daughter had also grown up. Dad, I need a new jacket and boots. All my friends have new clothes, I want them too, their daughter asked. You won't get far with old clothes. Matthew, our daughter is grown up, she'll finish school soon and go off to college. Why should she be dressed worse than others? I understand if we didn't have money. Girls require more spending, so let's go together and buy her clothes, his wife joined the argument. She felt sorry for their daughter and understood her, she had lived the same way, with her parents not having money, yet wanting to dress nicely. Reluctantly, Matthew took them to the store in his brand new car. If there was one thing he didn't mind spending money on, it was his car. He was already on his 3rd one. When their daughter left for college, he became even more stingy. Anastasia asked him, "Why have you become so greedy? You weren't like this before." "This isn't greed, it's thriftiness." "If I let you, you'd spend all the money," grumbled her husband. "I bought you the shampoo you asked for, and it's already almost gone." "Well, I have long hair, it needs to be thoroughly washed." "Then cut it." "Women with short hair use less shampoo," Matthew retorted. Anastasia looked at her husband in amazement. "No, this time I won't listen to you. I like my long hair and I'm not going to cut it," she responded sharply. She couldn't understand her husband, with whom she had lived for many years. When did he become so greedy? Do all men who start earning money go crazy? Thriftiness or greed? It's hard to tell. Once, they bought 12 ducklings, and suddenly 5 of them died. Why? What happened? Anastasia couldn't understand. But she heard an earful from her husband. "You don't know how to take care of them, you feed them whatever. It's your fault." Anastasia was always at fault when something went wrong. And if everything was fine, it was her husband's achievement. This is how they still live together. Their children have grown up, their son got married, their daughter too, and they have their own children. They visit their grandparents in the village. Matthew indeed loves his grandchildren and doesn't seem to spare anything for them. But he loves himself most of all and doesn't spare money for himself. But for his wife, he's stingy. She rarely goes anywhere with him in the car, mostly only to visit their children. Both of them are already not young. Anastasia still hopes that her husband will understand and change. But then she answers herself, it will never happen. It seems this is her fate. She lived poorly with her parents as a child, and now she lives with a stingy husband. She often has thoughts when she's alone. Why do I need this 2-story house? What's the use of it if there's no happiness or peace in it? I'd rather have a small, cozy house and live my own way in quiet. But most likely, Anastasia won't decide to leave her husband, and where would she go?